People often say that ancient humans only lived to about 30 years old, and at first that sounds believable. But is it actually true? If everyone really died that young, how did ancient civilizations build empires, wage wars, create great works of architecture, and pass knowledge from one generation to the next? The truth is that this famous number is real, but almost everyone misunderstands what it means. It doesn't mean most adults died at 30. It comes from a single statistic that tells a very different story. Once you understand how that statistic works, everything you thought you knew about life in the ancient world begins to change. The key to solving this mystery is understanding what life expectancy really means. Today, many people think it tells us how long the average adult lived, but that's not true. Life expectancy is the average age at death for everyone born, including babies and young children. Imagine 10 children are born. If 4 die very young while the other 6 live to 60 or 70, the average age drops dramatically. Looking only at that average makes it seem like nobody lived very long, even though many adults reached old age. This is exactly what happened in much of the ancient world. The famous number wasn't describing the lifespan of a typical adult. It was describing the average for an entire population. And one group more than any other pulled that average down: young children. The biggest reason ancient life expectancy was so low was infant mortality. In many parts of the ancient world, a large number of children died before reaching their 5th birthday. Diseases spread easily, clean drinking water was often unavailable, food shortages were common, and there were no antibiotics or vaccines to fight infections. Even a small illness that is easily treated today could become deadly thousands of years ago. Childbirth was also much more dangerous for both mothers and babies. These tragedies were sadly common, and every child who died young lowered the average life expectancy for the entire population. That is why the famous number of around 30 can be so misleading. It reflects the risks of being born in the ancient world, not the age when most adults died. But everything changed once someone survived those dangerous early years. A child who reached the age of 10 or 15 had already passed the period when death was most common. From that point on, living into the 50s or 60s became much more realistic. Historical records, ancient writings, and archaeological discoveries all show that many adults did exactly that. Some became experienced soldiers, respected leaders, skilled craftsmen, or wise elders who lived long enough to teach the next generation. While reaching 70 was less common than it is today, it was certainly possible, and people who lived that long were known and respected in many ancient societies. Ancient people didn't suddenly die when they turned 30. They simply had to survive childhood first. Life expectancy was not the same everywhere in the ancient world. Different civilizations faced different challenges depending on their environment, food supply, sanitation, and way of life. In ancient Egypt, the yearly flooding of the Nile helped produce reliable harvests, giving many people a steadier food supply. In Greece and Rome, large cities created opportunities for trade and learning, but crowded streets also allowed diseases to spread more easily. Hunter-gatherers often avoided the deadly epidemics found in cities, yet they faced accidents, harsh weather, and periods of hunger. Across every civilization, life was unpredictable, but one thing remained true. If a person survived childhood and avoided serious disease or injury, living into middle or old age was entirely possible. The exact age varied from place to place, but there was never a universal limit of 30 years. Not everyone had the same chance of living a long life. Wealth and social status made a significant difference. Rulers, nobles, and wealthy families usually had better food, cleaner water, safer homes, and people to care for them when they became sick. Farmers, laborers, and soldiers worked much harder and faced greater dangers every day. Even so, many ordinary people still reached their 50s and 60s despite these hardships. Archaeologists have discovered the remains of elderly men and women from many ancient societies, showing signs of aging that could only develop after decades of life. Growing old was not unusual. It simply wasn't guaranteed. Your chances depended on where you lived, your health, your occupation, and sometimes nothing more than luck. So what actually killed people in the ancient world? The biggest threats were not old age, but disease, infection, poor sanitation, injuries, childbirth, famine, and war. A small cut could become a deadly infection without antibiotics. Drinking contaminated water could spread illnesses through an entire community. A failed harvest could leave families without enough food for months, weakening their bodies and making disease even more dangerous. Soldiers risked their lives in battle, while ordinary workers faced accidents every day using simple tools. Even something as common as a broken bone could become life-threatening if it became infected. Life was far more dangerous than it is today, but these dangers affected people of all ages, not only those in their 30s. Despite these risks, history provides many examples of people who lived long lives. Ancient records mention rulers, philosophers, writers, and scholars who reached their 60s, 70s, and beyond. Archaeologists have also uncovered skeletons showing clear signs of advanced age, such as worn joints and healed injuries that took many years to develop. These discoveries prove that elderly people were present in ancient villages, towns, and cities. They served as leaders, teachers, advisors, and grandparents, passing knowledge and traditions to younger generations. They may not have been as common as they are today, but they certainly existed. Growing old in the ancient world was never impossible. It simply required surviving the many dangers that came much earlier in life. So why do so many people still believe that everyone in the ancient world died at 30? The answer is simple. The statistic is often misunderstood. When people hear that life expectancy was around 30 years, they imagine that adults rarely lived beyond that age. In reality, the number includes every death from birth onward, especially the many children who never had the chance to grow up. Imagine two communities where adults both live to around 65, but one loses many more children in early life. That community will have a much lower life expectancy, even though the adults live just as long. Without understanding how averages work, it's easy to reach the wrong conclusion. Over time, this misunderstanding spread through books, documentaries, classrooms, and conversations until it became one of history's most common myths. The real story is far more interesting. Ancient life was undeniably difficult, and surviving childhood was often the greatest challenge a person would ever face. Yet, those who reached adulthood frequently lived for decades, raising families, building civilizations, creating works of art, making scientific discoveries, and passing their knowledge to future generations. They were not a world where everyone died at 30. They were a world where early life was incredibly dangerous. Modern medicine, clean water, vaccines, and improved sanitation have greatly reduced those early deaths, raising average life expectancy around the world. So the next time someone says ancient people only lived to 30, you'll know the truth. The number was never about how long adults usually lived. It was about how many children never had the chance to grow old. So no, ancient people didn't all die at 30. Many simply had to survive childhood first. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Take care.